Hello friends, it's Kendra here from Piece Fabric Co. and we are back with week 4 of the Silk Stars Quilt-along. Do you like how I had to pause there? I was like 3, 4, yes, week 4. So last week, for the extra scrappy version of the Silk Star quilt, we worked on our half square triangles, and I had told you in that very long video to sew them together and press them open, and I had showed you the layout. Now, if you got all that done, good job. You're probably ahead of the game. I probably gave you way too big of a task last week. So if you're still catching up, if you just finished sewing your half square triangles and didn't trim them or press them open, that's okay. You work on that this week. You still have lots of time, and I'm gonna show you the next step once that's done, because I know there are those of you who are rushing ahead. I have seen blocks popping up in the Instagram feed. You are just trying to get it done. That's lovely. You can do that. So let me help you out with the next step. Now, I'd like to remind you that this is a tutorial for the extra scrappy Silk Stars quilt. If you are doing the regular scrappy or the vintage version, those instructions are completely in the pattern and you need to just follow those. If you're doing the extra scrappy version, you still need to purchase the pattern. It has measurements in it and things like that, but this is a variation in the layout and in the construction method. So if you've missed the previous videos, you can find them on my blog at piecefabric.co and you can catch up. So here we go. I am going to show you where you should be at, or what the next step is. This is where I left you last week. You had put all of your half square triangles together and I had showed you how you were going to lay them out. This is the H2 piece that you needed to use the vintage cutting instructions to cut for the size you're making. Now please remember, I'm using these pieces, they're extra tiny, as just a tutorial to show you. I resized them to make a little pillow, so they're tiny. If your pieces are this tiny, you have made a grave mistake along the way. Please go back and fix it. So but this is going to be the layout. So if you are just showing up on this video now, go back and watch the other ones. You'll see how we got there. So this is where I left you. You have them laid out like this, and you can see the diagonal parts of the star. You want to lay it out that way so that the colors connect like that. Got it? So once you have it laid out like that, and each set is going to make 2 identical things like this, okay? So each set that we were talking about in the previous videos is going to get you this and this. Now I've done the next step here on this one, which is to connect these 2 pieces together with a 1/4 inch seam. And yes, you do not want this matching up, and like, you want this 1/4 inch flat spot here because that's your seam allowance. So once we sew them together, you're going to have this corner of this top triangle right meet up where you want it. So you want those flat spots. So sew those 2 together. Next step, sew these 3 together. So I have the 2 sewed together here, the 3 sewed together here. Got it? And I've pressed them open. I press open. I had told you that I pressed the half square triangles open, so I just keep pressing my seams open. And I did use a little bit of flatter. After pressing them open on the back, I turned them this way and sprayed a bit of flatter just because they weren't getting as flat as I want. I actually think maybe my iron needs to be replaced and it just wasn't getting hot enough to do that. All right, next step. Now I've taken that 2 piece that I sewed and I sewed it onto the H2, and I still have the 3 piece down here. I think you can see where this is going, and you can see now how that flat spot is no more, and it's just nicely captured in the seam allowance. So I have a perfect ending triangle there. Then I haven't pinned up until this point. I've just carefully lined up, but for this step, I guess it should be twisted like this, where I'm attaching this 3 piece to this top. I have pinned because I want that seam to perfectly line up. So if we go back to this one, I want this join here to perfectly line up there. So I pin this. Everything else I just lay it out evenly, and then I sew that 1/4 inch seam, and look at that. It's pretty perfect, isn't it? Maybe that one could be a little more tight to the corner, but basically all of my triangles have nice sharp edges and are perfect. So this is what you're getting to with all of your little sets. Each set is going to make 2 of these, which is a quarter star. And then for the extra scrappy version, which we'll talk about next week, you're going to just lay them out in a pleasing way to you with using 4 different quarters and sew the stars together. I know some of you are just trying, like working so hard, working ahead, but that's okay. If that's what you need to do, go ahead. All right.
That's it. You made your quarter star. And again, if you're not quite that far, you still have time. We still have, checking the date, 2 weeks left in the Quilt-along. So you have plenty of time. If you feel like you just barely got the half square triangles made last week, why don't you work on trimming them and pressing them open this week, and then you'll just have a bunch of sewing to do in the last week. So you've got this. Message Christine or I if you have any questions. Instagram's a great way to do it, at Piece Fabric Co for me, and at tessellate_textiles for Christine. Have a lovely weekend. Talk to you soon.